and welcome to Cancer Book Club. This is May 2019, and today we have with us Dan Engel, who's written about a book called Thriving with Cancer. And wow, what a story Dan has! And so we're happy to have him with us today. So thank you, Dan, for agreeing to join us, and for your patience with our long process. I myself am just coming out of a long amount of treatment here. Here is my hospital room right here. So I'm in a cancer lodge right now. But anyways, we're finally able to kind of get up and running, and so it's great to have you with us.
Well, thank you for having me, and doing this from a hospital room is pretty impressive and a testament to who you are and wanted to help serve the world and help fellow cancer patients and caregivers. I'll just correct one thing. It's called Thriving Through Cancer.
Through Cancer. Thank you. Thank you. And there's a subtext there too.
And you can actually, I created a website for it. You can't buy the book through it. You can buy it through Amazon, but thrivingthroughcancer.com, and you can see a blurb from it and all that.
I want you to know that I recommended your book today to a father of a boy who at 16 has stage 4 melanoma.
Oh my.
Yeah. And so the boy's in remission now after having gone under immunotherapy, just as you did. And so, however, as a parent, of course, he's quite anxious about the topic. So I said, you've got to read this story. It'll blow your socks off.
Well, Robin, I'll just offer you this. If you'd like to connect us personally for me to have a conversation, I'm happy to do that.
Oh, well, I will share that with him. I'll share that with him.
I kind of think that part of the reason I'm alive is to be able to help others and make a difference in the world. I really believe I'm meant to be here and change the world. So having conversations with people, I always make time for that, no matter how crazy my schedule. Talking to people who need it, I'm there.
You know, it's so interesting. I think a lot of us go through major transformations with this cancer experience, and you certainly went through one, going from being an investment banker to where you are now. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
It's funny you put it that way. I gave a talk in New York to Flatiron Health earlier this year, and I called the talk "Doing Good is a Long Game." And I said, I'm going to take you on my journey from being a self-centered, materialistic, obsessed with making money yuppie, we're old enough to remember that term, into someone who believed he could change the world and make a real difference in the lives of others. And it was sort of happenstance. I mean, when I really got sick and spent 2 years doing nothing but battling, going from surgery to surgery and treatment to treatment, and all through that stuff, I worked for a company, a very large company, where the CEO was a real, I'm going to use a Yiddish term, mensch, just a good person who said, get healthy. Sid said, get healthy, in my own training, get healthy. And so I didn't really have to go to work, but I needed my mind to work. And we started this nonprofit in San Diego called the Miracle League of San Diego, which is a baseball league for kids with special needs. So it gave me this purpose to raise the money to build this rubberized field that accommodates wheelchairs and walkers and the sight impaired. And when we were raising the money and building the field, we thought, we're going to build the field and just give it, to all these people to use it. Had no idea going into it that it would become, aside from my kids, the love of my life. It's truly the happiest place in San Diego, and it's a spiritual place. And I love being involved every Saturday that we operate our league. And our field opened 2 weeks before I got 2 weeks after I got my first clean scans in 2 years. So it really is a spiritual place, and I call it my synagogue. It's where I feel connected in the universe, whatever your personal belief of God or universe. It's such a happy place. And I never knew. I grew up in a traditional Jewish household where giving charity is part of daily life. I mean, that's just what we do. And I think it's an obligation, not just a right. And I always wrote checks, but until I met these families whose lives I changed and gave back with time, I didn't realize how good that could feel. And I just love doing that. I just feel that's my mission in life is to make a difference. And I changed San Diego with the Miracle League. I tried to change the world with another nonprofit I started, Pitch It Forward, teaching leadership to high school athletes. And I think I'm changing the cancer world when I build Patient True Talk to facilitate those one-to-one connections between newly diagnosed and those who've been there before. It's something that's missing in our world. There are all these advocacy groups that have peer-to-peer networks, but it relies on someone to intervene. You've got to apply and someone's got to look. Why shouldn't it work like Match.com, where you look at profiles and find the person that most resembles you, has the closest background, and send out a personal email and try to have one-off conversations? So yeah, I've changed, and yet I'm back working at an office because I need to make a living too. I'm not wealthy enough to do this for a lifetime. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable. I'm always interested in people's journey through this cancer experience, because some people don't change at all, which I can't really understand that, because I know it's brought huge changes into my life.
Yeah, I don't know what I can't fathom that either. I can't fathom those who I, I can't fathom those who don't want to fight every day to live. I like living. I like.
You had two small children too, right? So that's.
I did. I'm going to San Francisco Friday for my daughter's graduation from college, so I'm very.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
The day
And
you thought, and many days I'm sure you wondered if you'd see that day, right?
um, truthfully, not many, because I always thought I'm one of these guys. I always knew I was going to beat it until it just kept coming back, and
See that, and that's what I want to reflect on in your book as you read. The chapters that start with, I'll take radiation for 200, please. And then, okay, so we get you through that in the story, and then we get you through and then it's again, and then again, and then again, and then there was that patch where you had, the tumor on the brain, and then the tumor on the chest, and you had it seemed so relentless. And I'm certain that many people reading it would go, I would have given up or just in despair, but you didn't, and you kept on moving to the next and the next, and then the breakthrough. Like what I wanted to say about you I want to talk about you being a pioneer in terms of immunotherapy with the clinical. You were like one of the very first in the clinical trials for the immunotherapy, which now is almost a standard of care for melanoma today.
Yeah, it is. And really, my first clinical trial I was on in 1999, I guess, was a cancer vaccine. That was a live melanoma that had been irradiated to prevent it from replicating. So I did that, but it included shots of something called BCG. That was a type of immunotherapy. Then my next trial was multi-peptide vaccine trial. Then we had the biochemotherapy, the nastiest cocktail ever invented, but that had in it, dacarbazine, vinblastine, cisplatin, interferon, and interleukin-2. Those are considered immunotherapies, but not in the newer class of immunotherapies. Then we did that carbotaxol sorafenib, which had a BRAF inhibitor in it. And then, I had the high-dose IL-2 GM-CSF, and then we got to IPI, as it was known, and it's Yervoy. It was anti-CTLA-4 antibody, and I love the science behind it. So it basically CTLA-4 is cytotoxo-lymphocytic antigen 4. I think that's the right term. Downregulates it when it downregulates and prevents your immune system from doing what it's supposed to do, which is fight cancer all the time. And anti-CTLA-4 binds to it and creates this blockade. And so what it does is it jumpstarts your immune system and creates these killer T cells that go out and fight the shit out of disease, if you don't mind my saying. And that's the way it works. And it was amazing how when I started on it, I had about 8 tumors, lymphatic, one on my chest, one on my back. And at about 3 weeks in, this tumor on my chest started to shrink. I couldn't believe it. All my other tumors had been lymphatic. I never knew they were there, right?
Right.
And he was the first one that you could see and feel, and all of a sudden it started to shrink. But a funny story, at least to me it's funny, is one morning I woke up and my jaw was swollen to about the size of a grapefruit, or at least half a grapefruit, right? And I knew intuitively this couldn't be cancer because cancer cells can't grow that quickly. So it had to be a positive reaction. And I took my daughter to an orthodontist appointment. And I think this is funny. The receptionist looks at me and says, you know, you've got something protruding on your jaw. Like I could have the dentist look at that for you. And I'm like, really? I couldn't have seen this or felt. I mean, it was mind-boggling that she would say that as if I was not aware. But that was one of the early immunotherapies. I was on a trial. What was great about this is before we started on carbotaxol sorafenib, and this gets back to why it's so important to be treated at a center of excellence if you can afford it and find it, right? My doctor, Dr. O'Day, there was a study out there with 3 different arms of 1, 3, and 10 milligrams per kilogram of weight, of dosage. And he wanted me to get the 10 milligrams because he thought my body could tolerate it. But that trial, it was randomized between the 3 arms. And he knew, because he was one of the key researchers, one of the principal investigators, that there was going to be a new trial opening up, was a single arm with the highest dose. And he put me on another drug in the interim, the carbotaxol sorafenib, to try to keep things at bay, maybe work until this trial opened up. So to be able to be at a center of excellence where someone knew that was coming and could make that decision for me or help me make the decision to wait for what we thought was the better outcome. And what's amazing, it only works on 20 to 22% of the patients, and there are no biomarkers to help you figure out why it works on us.
Not yet.
Responders, not yet. And I'm not sure they will on this one, but so that was pretty remarkable. And he said, when I showed him that picture of my jaw, he just was so happy for me, because he said I was the quickest responder he'd ever seen, and the biggest response he'd seen. And all the side effects, excuse me, are autoimmune related. So, and they're positively correlated with the response. So I got the rash, I got the diarrhea. And this comes back to another point to me that I make in the book that I think is so important in clinical trials, is you need to listen to what the nurses tell you, what to report. I can't fathom, right? They told me, if you get diarrhea, immediately call us, immediately record how bad and how frequent, right? Yet some people died on earlier trials from bad diarrhea that ended up sepsis. I can't fathom anyone waiting for it to get so bad to tell someone about it, that they end up dying from it, right? If the doctor and nurse said, you tell us instantly, fine, I'm listening to you, because there's nothing to be embarrassed about. There's nothing a nurse could ever hear from a patient that they haven't heard before, that they won't deal with right away, that they won't get the doctor involved right away if you need the doctor involvement. So I'm just a big believer in just listening and being a good patient and trying. I mean, look, that was a pivotal trial. It ultimately got the drug approved. It was the first drug approved in 15 years for melanoma, and the first one that's proven to extend life.
Yes. What that was a nice part about your book. After you get to the end, and you have these little nuggets of wisdom, and some of them are like, listen to your nurse carefully. Be sure not to be embarrassed about describing the worst possible embarrassing thing. Be sure to, you put in little pieces, including emotional psychosocial advice, like have a person with you at your appointments and so on. Like, you have these little nuggets, which I love, the little brackets around them, like and they were little digestible bits. And so I was thinking to myself, if someone was newly diagnosed and sort of, oh my God, what do I do? And then reading your story and going, oh my God, listen to everything he's been through, that you'd come out of it still having distilled those really key points. That's true of all cancers. One should,
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, because that's what I meant for it to be. There's a story, but I learned a lot of things. I know a lot of people who've battled cancer multiple times. I don't know that I've ever met anyone who's actually enrolled in 6 clinical trials and signed those consent forms 6+ times. Every time they give you a 1-paragraph amendment, you got to sign it again.
I guess Pat and I talked to lots of survivors through the Cancer Book Club, and I don't think we've ever talked to anyone who's been.
No, but on the topic of clinical trials, I want to circle back a little bit, because the point you brought up earlier about seek out centers of excellence is really important, because it plugs you into not only the lead investigators in all these trials, but that knowledge network that is somewhat amorphous in terms of finding out what's really going on with your particular cancer. How did you go about, what motivated you to really seek out that center of excellence that has made a remarkable difference in your path?
Yeah, it truly did. In my case, it was just happenstance. I was in LA, and when I was first diagnosed, when I went to the dermatologist, and this goes back to, my daughter's 21, graduating college. This whole journey started when she was 1.5 years playing on the steps. I was sitting under the skylight, and I'd had a short haircut, and my wife looked down, and the sun was shining down, and she saw a scab on my scalp and said, you ought to get it checked out. And that dermatologist, so I consider that God looking down on me and my family. I'm not really a religious person anymore, but I don't know how else to define that moment other than a spiritual. It was meant to be, right? But my dermatologist sent me to the John Wayne Cancer Institute in LA. And so I happened to get to a center of excellence. And that's where they developed the trial for cancer vaccine. They developed cancer vax there. And so I was aware.
You lived in a major American city.
LA.
Right, LA. I mean, one of the biggest cities in the country. Right. So that they would definitely have
that was a benefit. I got directed to the John Wayne Cancer Institute by a dermatologist who knew they were the best. He could have sent me to UCLA, right? Or USC. There were 3 outstanding centers in LA, but the John Wayne Cancer Institute, they were the experts in melanoma. They developed cancer vax. And for whatever reason, this dermatologist, and I will tell you, most dermatologists that I've come across have no idea how to get you to a real top-notch oncologist. Yeah. And they don't know about clinical trials. So I was fortunate, it fell in my lap, and I happened to get there. And after the surgery, and we talked about, well, there's a 50% chance of recurrence. To me, my question was, okay, because I'm a deal guy, I'm a math guy. is there anything I can do to boost those odds in my favor? And he said, well, you can look at a clinical trial. We have one here, and there's one other in New York at Sloan Kettering. There were only 2 trials at that time available to me in an adjuvant setting, right? That, for those who don't know, adjuvant setting means there's no evidence of disease and you're doing the trial to prevent recurrence as opposed to a treatment. And that's how I got on my first clinical trial. And it was luck that I was in LA. So I don't know how else to describe it other than it was luck that that's where I got to in the first place. I'd like to think I'm a smart, aggressive guy who always wanted to win and live, and I would have found it otherwise. But I just happened to be there. And, I was willing to travel for second opinions later in my journey when I had to. I went to USC for a clinical trial when that was the only one available. I traveled, there's a story in the book, to one East Coast major academic center where I had the worst experience of my life, and went to MD Anderson where I had a great experience, and was ready to enroll in a trial there and travel until my doctor and the doctor at USC both said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And I'm like, you sent me there for my second opinion.
Yeah, that was interesting.
It was right. That's where you sent me. He said, yeah, but that's old science. And Dr. O'Day is about to report new data.
Yes.
So I've always been on that forefront and willing, because I wanted to live. So it's like, what do I do next? If I need surgery, Rick, Dr. Essner, Rick, what's the next first appointment you have? And this is one of my kind of tricks, my lessons. Always try to be the first appointment of the day for surgery if you can. Because
insist on it, actually.
Well, I do.
Yeah.
I've been able to. And I like to joke with my surgeon. My next one's free because I've punched the card 10 times.
That's right. That was funny that you and your wife at the times.
But I think your clinical trial thing, the thing that I took away from it, and I had some interesting clinical trial experiences too, but is once you get into a network of the people who are the thought leaders in battling your disease, that's where you want to be. They may have differences of opinion, but somewhere in that mix of people is your best chance.
I agree with you. And that's exactly right. And once you get in that world, they actually do communicate with each other. They're not silos of research like there are in the basic science level. And in the melanoma world, I could name you the top 10 guys in the country, and 7 of them know me. And if anybody asks me for a referral, I will send them to the top doctor closest to them geographically. And for whatever reason, I've built this network of people who trust me and believe in me and love me. They'll take those appointments quicker than it's mind-boggling to me how I've been able to navigate it so easily for me. And I'm conscious and cognizant of the benefits I've had that your typical patient doesn't have. They don't have access to those centers of excellence. They don't have access to those doctors. They don't have access to the insurance.
Well, you have to battle. You just have to battle to get that access is what it comes down to.
But it requires not just a battle. You've got to know how to. You've got to have that desire. You've got to have a little bit of an education level to understand what levers to pull. You certainly have to be diligent, right? I never take no for an answer. I mean, and I walk in like I own the place.
I have a question for you, Dan.
Yeah.
When you finally got to a point after the end of all your treatments when you were having clear scans. So this would again be an adjuvant situation. You're not in a clinical trial now and haven't been for how many years has it been since you've been in a clinical trial?
Only about 5, because technically, I was on a maintenance clinical trial
Right.
for seven
Right.
and a half years, but that was adjuvant. I
Yeah.
received Ippy, Yervoy,
So
at
at
probably
what point?
more
At
than
what point?
anybody in the world.
At what point were you able to say or decide, I have done enough adjuvant. I don't need. I don't want or
It
need to
wasn't,
continue.
I didn't make that decision.
They
Um,
did.
Bristol Myers Squibb did.
Oh,
At,
I see.
at one appointment, it was 7.5 years. Dr. Boasberg, and I was at a place where it didn't matter whether it was Dr. Hamid, Dr. O'Day, Dr. Boasberg, they all knew my care and my files, this thick. You can't even see it. It's like Trump's taxes, right? That's how big my medical file is. Too complicated for anybody to understand.
That's
Uh,
right.
uh, he said, well, this is your last treatment. BMS is canceling the trial. And he said, I recommend, you come in every 6 months for the next 2 years for scans and check up. I had the ability to send a group email, including him and 4 other of the top melanoma practitioners in the country, including one at Sloan Kettering, one at Harvard, one at Yale, one at Moffitt. I said, okay, they canceled the trial. This is what Dr. Boasberg is recommending. What do you guys think? And they all responded, and they're under no obligation to do that, right? Doctors don't have to do, and they won't give you advice unless you come into their office and see them. But
Right.
one of them, Keith Flaherty, said, "You're done. My experience, you're clean. You're cured." But
And were you emotionally able to handle being outside treatment, the treatment? Because when you're in treatment, you're in the fight mode. When treatment ends is when you have to kind of
well,
let go of.
because it was adjuvant setting, it wasn't fight mode, and the only anxiety I ever had once I got probably 3 years out was the scanxiety, right? I don't know who came
Yeah.
up with the term, but I love it. It was the scanxiety between, the moment you get the day you're going in for scans and getting the results.
Oh,
Now
see,
this,
I get scanxiety the moment I schedule it, so I can suffer for several weeks.
well, and that's, I didn't, and for me, going to the Angeles clinic, I'd go in first thing in the morning, get my scans, and I'd have the results in a few hours. Again, that is not the norm. That is not the norm for most people, right? So my scanxiety lasted hours. Um, and one story is when Dr. Boasberg, who speaks very slowly and deliberately, he comes into the room and he starts talking. And I said, well, what about the scans? And he pauses. And I swear to you, I thought he's pausing to say, I don't know how to tell you this, but the cancer is back. And it's like 3 seconds of a pause. And he's like, oh, I forgot to check. Let's walk down the hall and find out. I about passed out during those 3 seconds. But back to your question, Robin, I didn't have that anxiety really. And at the end of 7.5 years, I was
Ready to stop.
I was, but it was not until a year later, because I was going to do it for 2 more years. I'm in with Peter for my checkup, and he says, "Now, how long have you been clean?" I said, 8.5 years. He said, "You know what? You're done." So, what do you mean I'm done? He said, you don't have to come back and see me. You don't need checkups anymore. I said, "Are you telling me I'm cured?" And he said, "Yeah, that's what I'm saying." That's when all hell broke loose in my mind. I can't believe I heard those words. Now, he didn't say you're cured, but he acknowledged it. And no one really says that, right? You're in remission. To call it permanent remission, but to hear those words, you're done. And Keith Flaherty had said that a year before, right? That's when the emotions took over of, I'm finally done with this journey and can get back to living. Because for 10 years, I was driving to LA 2 hours from San Diego, but could be 3 hours with traffic, whatever, only for medical appointments every month to 3 months, depending on what was going on. And my family was here, but I hated it, right? Because who likes to drive for medical treatment, even if it's, a maintenance treatment I hated LA. And that just freed my mind to live LA again, not under the specter of medical treatment.
You both have that in common. You have both been through a grueling number of years dealing with cancer. My hat is off to both of you. I don't think I could do what either of you have done. What advice would you give somebody for dealing with a decade or 5 years or whatever of just relentless cancer in your life?
Dan is even Dan and I have kids the same age, and he's I think he outdistanced me actually on this one. It's very hard to do.
I think my advice would probably be the same as Robin's. I'm guessing is keep at it. I mean, science.
What are you going to do?
Right, science. I wanted to live. I never understood people who gave up. People would say, "How could you always be so positive?" And I say, "I'm looking at my kids. How could I not? I want to grow up and say." I set a goal. I wanted to be alive for my son's bar mitzvah. Right? We made that. So I wanted to be alive for my daughter's bat mitzvah. That was the next goal. You set these, I'd call it intermediate term, right? Because it's hard to really look long term, but I didn't want to look short term, right? Months, it just never contemplated that. To me, it's always, okay, what do I have to do? And science is advancing so rapidly today that you got to just keep at it and get to a place of excellence. And if you're not getting satisfaction where you're being treated, or you don't think you're getting the right options, go search elsewhere. Don't go to Dr. Google. Don't ever do that.
I have a question. I want to kind of bring our conversation back to the book itself. So, Dan, can you tell us about writing the book? What enabled you to do that? And also, in what way did it change your perception of your cancer experience to have done it?
Oh, wow. It was very hard and cathartic at the same time. Because there are about 150 more pages that I cut out that dealt with my personal relationship with my wife, who, as you read the book, is now my ex-wife. A lot of introspection as to things that I did in my life that maybe I wish I had done differently, really examining our relationship and what broke it down. And it wasn't, as I say, it wasn't the cancer that broke our relationship. It was broken long before, but cancer and dealing with it highlighted the issues and illuminated the issues we had. So it was very cathartic to get all this down on paper and examine who I was and what I'd become. And so it was good, but it was really hard. I'm shocked that 10 years later, I was able to remember all these details, especially with chemo brain, where it's a true affliction. I don't know how it afflicts you, but to me, I lose words. I just can't find them. I know, I just can't find words. It's not a memory thing per se, but to remember what I did, the details I have, it was really impactful to me to write it. And I wrote it somewhat for my kids to really know the true story, somewhat for myself. And then, because I felt I learned a lot along the way, I think I could help others. And that's why I put those lessons learned at the end of every chapter, that if you did nothing else but went to the lessons learned at the end of every chapter, I think the book could be helpful to people. And I think whether you're the patient yourself or caregiver, there's stuff that applies. And whether you're a cancer patient, melanoma, breast cancer, lung, or some other chronic disease, I think these lessons apply. And what I hoped by writing it is there's situations that happen that don't feel alone, right? I mean, I know a lot of people that marriages don't survive. Um, a lot of people that have experienced what I did, where someone that you thought would be the greatest support winds up being useless, and friends that were maybe tangential in your life all of a sudden come out of the woodwork and are the best friends you could ever have. And you get through situations where you have that really one bad night in the hospital where you think, God, this is over. And you get that one compassionate nurse who sits with you for 2 hours and makes you feel like you're the only person in the world.
The oncology nurses are the unsung heroes. I mean, they are amazing.
Oh, I call them the second family you never want to have, but if you have to, the best you could have. At least that was my experience with my nurses. And something, again, where I'm fortunate, I kind of made it a point to buy them lunch every time I was sitting.
I love that. I thought that was a brilliant idea.
But I could afford it, right? Not everybody sitting there can spend $50 or $80 bringing in lunch for the nurses. But to me, it was worth every penny because it made them feel they recognized. I don't know how they do what they do, right? There are some patients like me who are always upbeat no matter what, and we laugh and tell stories. And then there are those, how many times have you been in the infusion room and 2 chairs over, you're just hearing moans and cries of anguish, and it's just you inside, and the nurses have to deal with that every day.
And families and sobbing and the whole gamut of things. It's really a tough job.
Oh, I can't imagine. So I just wanted to share my stories because I think they could help people. And that's the whole, at the end of the day, that's the purpose of the book, is to provide that hope, and for people to see there is a reason to fight, and here are things that can help you in your fight.
So would you say that writing the book changed you?
Oh, no, the cancer changed me. Writing the book, just
documenting that.
Documenting it maybe it changed my perception of what I went through a little bit, and made me examine my relationship with my ex-wife and kids in greater detail. And most of that stuff doesn't make it in the book because no one needs to know those details, right? Least alone my kids. And some of the stories in there about my ex-wife were a little bit harsh, and my kids did have a hard time reading those because they didn't see that part of their mother.
You were careful to keep them from it. Remember you saying about you got the in-laws to take them while you had those discussions.
Yeah, well, even a lot of the stuff you don't see in the book, because I excluded it, were conversations that they definitely heard.
I thought you handled that reason quite sensitively. I mean, you had to describe, and I thought, reading about Susie's reaction, it just, in some ways, it was, I didn't understand it, and then I also did understand it. How, as a caregiver, fear can turn into anger so quickly.
Yeah, those are the words I used, right? It's and when you're in the middle of it, you can't see that it's fear.
Yeah.
All you feel is the anger, and that can be very hard on family life. And
anger can be so misplaced, right?
Right. But when you're in it, you don't understand that it's the fear that's causing it. And so you react to the anger. And
you know, that is the value in these books that people write about their cancer experience. One, the reflection that you have the time to go back and really look at the experience and perhaps reframe it a bit or revisit it. But for people starting to go through this, to see that other people are going through very similar difficulties, or their difficulties that they may read about are inspirational. Sharing these stories is such a critical piece of this experience that I just applaud you for writing a really terrific book.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's really the point, right? Is everybody's experience is different and unique, but there are a lot of commonalities in experience. And I don't want people to ever feel alone. And whether I become their friend because they read my book and they think it's valuable, or it causes them to reach out to others that they think can, you can't battle it alone, right? And you don't choose your family, but you can build your family outside of blood relations. And when you're battling cancer, the bigger connected family you have, in my mind, the better. And I still struggle with friends of mine who are battling cancer and keep it very close to the vest. And I struggle with it because I believe I could help them if they wanted to reach out and talk to me. But I know that I can't force them to do that, right? Everybody handles things differently. And so my book is there just to share those stories to help people understand there are other ways to deal with them, and you're not alone. There's nothing you experience that someone else hasn't.
Yeah.
You may not know that person off the top of your head, but it's out there. And my hope is that people just find their way to the best centers they can, get the best help they can, find support, find spirituality where it exists for you. For some people, faith is really important in their battle. In my case, it wasn't. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. But if faith brings you comfort, and your faith leaders, whether it's a priest, a rabbi, a minister, whatever religion, if that brings you comfort, reach out to it. Get your comfort. Feel free to talk to people. That if you hold it in, the one thing I know is if you hold these emotions in and you don't talk, you can't get past anything, right? How are you going to advance in your treatment in your life if you don't talk to people? And I don't care who it is, right? Just find someone and just share. There'll be someone who can help you. You're not alone.
I think those are wise words to end on, unless you have anything else, Robin.
Yes, no, I was just about to say that exact same. Life works together. So long we can take the words out of each other's mouths. That's exactly what it is. That this is a really great, you brought food to us here, Dan, for us to think about, and for our viewers. On Cancer Book Club, we get a lot of people who watch our replays, and many times we hear about people sort of digesting the lessons on their own time through the replays. So we'll be posting the recording of this and I know you're really good at promotion. You'll want to tweet out or share somehow the tag, and that we'll send that, and you'll that way you can others can see this through a medium that other people like to consume information, sometimes by video more than in any other method, and it'll lead people to the book, through the book, and help them sort of reclaim their own narratives,
And the name of the book again?
Thriving Through Cancer, How I Conquered the Personal, Medical, and Professional Impacts of Cancer. and you can find it on Amazon. You could get a blurb from the website thrivingthroughcancer.com. But I want to thank you, Robin and Pat, for thinking of me and conducting this interview and for sharing your lessons and your stories. I think we're all inspirations to others, and we've got to just keep fighting and sharing. And through your posting this and sharing, people can reach out to me personally. I'm not always on Twitter, but I will ultimately see every message, and I do pledge to respond to everyone as timely as I can. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you for being one of the those pioneers in terms of immunotherapy.
Yeah.
You know, immunotherapy is really probably the road that we hope all cancers have an immunotherapy. Mine doesn't have one right now, but we'll hope a little long enough that they develop it. And you know, just for you, just to watch you go through those conventional treatments and then into the immunotherapy. On behalf of melanoma survivors I know who are on immunotherapy, if it weren't for people like you, clinical trials like you did, there wouldn't be the data to support their treatment today. And I've seen people go from to fully living.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that. And you know, there's one statistic: only 4% of adult patients are treated on clinical trials.
Yeah.
That's got to change.
Yep.
And you know, hopefully my book, you know, Patient True Talk, can help people get comfortable finding clinical trials and the willingness to participate where it can potentially help.
Let me throw in for anybody who's listening to this, you can go to OncoLink, which is part of the University of Pennsylvania. They'll hook you up with a nurse who's knowledgeable about clinical trials and help you sort through all the clinical trial information at clinicaltrials.gov and find the ones that are right for you. This is also a way to get into that network of thought-leading physicians, if you will. You can see what the research is, see what they're doing, you can read their papers, and if you don't have the luck that Dan had, or you don't have a connection, it is a methodology you can use to find clinical trials and find excellence.
Wow, thank you, Pat. That's fantastic.
That is fantastic. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I'm going to write that down.
Everyone, have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.